Hare Krishna. So I'm just going to continue on straight into our talks about 50 years in Krishna consciousness. I had been speaking about the time between 75 and 76. Let me just offer my obeisances first. Om Ajnanatmirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militang Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasinavevita Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So I finished off in the last video explaining how Srila Prabhupada made a surprise visit to the Delhi temple when I was there acting as pujari. So that was an exciting event. Apparently Srila Prabhupada had he had been wanting to meet with Indira Gandhi for some time, and of course not easy. She's a prime minister, not easy to get an appointment, and when you did, you just had to go. So I don't know where Prabhupada flew in from, but he just came immediately in order to have this meeting with Indira Gandhi, that it was important to him. And but at that time, there were a lot of heavy things going on in India. Right around this time, Indira Gandhi had declared a state of emergency across the country. Was based on the rationale that there were eminent internal and external threats to the India state. And this meant that the Prime Minister had authority to just rule by decree. She could cancel elections, and she could suspend civil liberties as she liked. Pretty powerful. So she could put political opponents in jail, and the press could be censored, and several other human rights violations definitely took place during this time. There was I remember hearing about that there was a mass campaign for compulsory sterilization. Imagine these people, just appear somewhere and start doing forced vasectomies to limit population growth. Wow. I heard that some government people came into Cont'd and did this to some Babas. I mean, I don't know if that was true. I heard that. But anyway, it was turbulent times. Now, the day before, I remember hearing this, I don't know much about it, but the day before Srila Prabhupada was going to meet Indira Gandhi, apparently someone important was assassinated. So it was something that was very disturbing to Indira Gandhi. So she did keep the appointment with Srila Prabhupada, but he mentioned that, she was not in a state of mind to really pay attention. She was disturbed, but she did meet with Srila Prabhupada. That's my Gayatri alarm. So she did meet with Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada didn't see it as a very successful meeting, but his intention in meeting her was to ask her to grant long-term visas for his students. So of all the things he could have talked about, this is what he was concerned for, because the India projects at this time, they were run entirely by foreigners. There were very, very few Indian devotees at this time. So it was very important that Prabhupada could get, his disciples to stay there and keep the projects going. So, it wasn't so successful, but it was something. That was all I heard about it. And So Prabhupada was there for Guru Puja the next morning, and the Delhi temple was just like a room, like a living room. It was very small. And there were these visiting sannyasis were there, Brahmananda was there. There were some pretty large-bodied men standing in front of Srila Prabhupada. And the only ladies, there was myself and Madhura. Madhura had just had a baby. And so we were kind of very much, you know, because it's a small temple room, and we were just like, you know, backed up against the wall, kind of almost hiding in the back. I wasn't even thinking of going forward to offer a garland or to offer flowers because, you know, it was wall to wall, large men, and, you know, it was a little intimidating. It was this tiny, I was just happy to be there. And then Prabhupada, in the middle of the Guru Puja, he started going like this. And, you know, those men in the front were like looking, they didn't understand what Prabhupada meant. And then he went like this. So they like kind of stepped aside and looked at us two little flies on the wall back there. And, you know, we understood that Prabhupada, then he went like this, you know, that he wanted us to come up. You know, Prabhupada was so kind. I mean, the men in the front didn't even like acknowledge our existence, but Srila Prabhupada saw we were there, and he called us up. So that was so sweet and so beautiful. And so we went up, you know, going through, crawling through, and, you know, zoom back, and then the wall closed up again. And then Srila Prabhupada, he did it again. He went like this. And then he was looking at Madhura, and Madhura's like a really shy person, and she likes to be, you know, unseen, and it's just her nature. And at least it appeared to be at that time. And so Prabhupada was looking at her and pointing and saying, "Come, come." So he wanted her to come up, and he wanted to see the baby. And so, you know, Madhura was so uncomfortable, and she comes up and she's showing little Tejasini. And Prabhupada said, "What is her name?" And Prabhupada had given the name, so most likely he knew. And she said, "Tejasvini." And Prabhupada started to laugh, because there was this little bit of a challenging relationship, I think, between Tejas, the temple president, and his wife Madhura. She was very young. She came to India. I mean, the austerity and the difficulty of being alone in Delhi, you know, as like a teenage girl. You know, and Tejas was quite a bit older and more experienced, but I mean, for sure, it was very tough for Madhura. And Madhura is a wonderful kirtan person. She could play the mridanga really nicely. Prabhupada heard her playing the mridanga. He was in another room, and he heard her playing. And he stopped, and he was listening, his servant said, and he was listening for quite a while. And he said, "Just like a gopi." And Prabhupada really appreciated. And he knew that it was very hard for her. And Tejas was not being the easiest person to be with. He's very eccentric, incredible devotee, but, you know, not easy. A lot of people didn't feel comfortable working with him. You know, so it was difficult for Madhura, and her shelter would be that she would run off to sometimes Vrindavan, because Jamuna was there. And Jamuna and Madhura, they had a very loving relationship, and they did kirtan together. And both of them were having, you know, it was very, very hard what devotees had to do in that early time. I think it's hard for any, you know, younger people to even imagine how difficult, the difficulties Jamuna went through. And especially as women, you know, so all glories to their service, that's all I can say. But sometimes Tejas would complain to Prabhupada about Madeira, that, oh, she keeps running off to Vrindavan. And and then Prabhupada, he just always said something, oh, very good, she's running to Krishna. So he would never say, like, why is she doing that? She should come back. And he would always, and then I heard these stories, I'm pretty sure they're accurate, that Tejas also complained, she just won't listen to me. She's not submissive. And then Prabhupada said, well, then you listen to her. She is a nice devotee. So these are the kind of stories you don't hear so much. That's why I mention, because there are many devotees who did just glorious unsung services. Madeira, one of those women was amazing. And so Srila Prabhupada was laughing because he knew this conflict, so he names her child Tejasvini, after the father. And so Prabhupada, when he asked her, what's the name? And she goes, Tejasvini. And he's like, oh, Prabhupada was, he got a kick out of it. But you just see how he was so kind, and aware and conscious of the tiny people also, of everyone who was around him. And, so of course that, totally warmed our hearts and kept us going, because Prabhupada was always so appreciative of everyone's service. And I remember during that Guru Puja, I don't remember who it was, but someone had brought a new edition of, I believe, Chaitanya Charitamrita that had just come out. And so we watched Prabhupada go through the book, looking at all the pictures. And what a pleasure to see him. Like, he was very childlike. His joy in receiving a new book published, what it meant to Prabhupada. That's also inconceivable for us, how Prabhupada was producing these books and what it must have felt like to him to another one's out. And I think many times Prabhupada said that was his greatest happiness, to see these books being produced. So witnessing his joy was a blessing. It was a blessing. And I think, as I mentioned, that Prabhupada was staying in the rooms that we were living in, myself and Madeira, and I think Mahamaya was there visiting. And so we were just living on the roof, which was, this is the middle of the summer. It must have been August, around August. And, but of course we were happy to do so. And I was sitting on the steps because I had nowhere to go, really. So, and it was not so hot on the stairwell. And Prabhupada's door was open. And I remember hearing them talk. I think Gopal Krishna Maharaj was there. A few Swamis were there. And they were talking about getting property in Kurukshetra. And you could hear from the discussion how Srila Prabhupada was, he was quiet. And there was a lot of discussion about the politics of it, the money of it, and, the mundane aspects of getting a property. And I was noticing that Prabhupada was just quiet as the discussion was going on. And finally, Prabhupada, his voice, that deep voice came in. He said, the reason that we want this property, this is the place. This is the place where Krishna and his brother, and how they went. And he started talking about Kurukshetra and the pastimes. And it just like whoosh, took it to another level that was just very beautiful. That Prabhupada always kept, although we have to do all these things in the material world, and we have to get the money, and we have to buy and do the legal things, but Prabhupada was always fixed on this awareness of what we were doing, why we were doing, and what would be the benefit of what we were doing. So it was a lovely conversation to listen to. Again, another blessing for me. And I mentioned how Prabhupada allowed us to sit there on the roof while he took his massage, knowing that, you know, it was pretty austere for us. And then Prabhupada had a darshan in the room there in the afternoon. And it was really just a few sort of local people, because, you know, suddenly Prabhupada came, and some local people who came to see Prabhupada. They kind of filled up the small room. And so I sat and listened, even though it was in Hindi, and it was just wonderful to just watch Prabhupada's movements, and I didn't know what he was saying. I could catch a little bit here and there. And then at the end, someone brought in a plate of fruit for Prabhupada to distribute, which was a fixed thing that Prabhupada wanted always after any program, any program, that there should be some prasadam given out. Like you remember, even the stories of even in the early days, Prabhupada maybe just had an apple that he cut up into 15 pieces, but he would distribute prasadam. So this is an important thing, an important part of what Prabhupada always wanted us to do. So I was excited because I saw like the people got into the line, the visitors, and I was the only lady there, and I don't remember there being any other devotees. There might have been a couple of other male devotees there, but they were not in the line. So I got in the line, and I was like so excited. I never got prasadam from Prabhupada's hand. And, you know, going up close to Prabhupada was always, for me, being around Prabhupada was always just absolutely overwhelming. I was not, I just was overwhelmed in his presence. I almost couldn't be like a normal human being in front of him. And so I was getting more and more excited as, you know, the line's going. And just when it comes to me, it was like my heart's pounding, and I'm just like intensely excited. And then the last person in front of me, and then Prabhupada turned, he put the plate down, and he said something like good night, or, you know, like he ended the program. And I just stood there. It's like my heart fell down to the bottom of my feet. And I was just like so disappointed that I was just like kind of frozen there. And then Prabhupada looked up at me in the cheekiest look. And he was teasing me. And then he took a big bunch of fruit and he said, "Come on," like this, "come on." And then he like slapped it into my hand like really strongly. And I was flabbergasted. My spiritual master is teasing me. And you know, Prabhupada, this is the beauty. Srila Prabhupada is like, he's so human. He's so great and so exalted and so inconceivably wonderful. But at the same time, you know, he could be very humorous and just very normal, a very normal, approachable human being that liked to laugh and liked to have exchanges. Like sometimes my husband told me that sometimes Prabhupada just wanted to get somebody else's opinion or feedback or just discuss about something. And devotees would be so overwhelmed and so in awe of Prabhupada that they just wouldn't like kind of be able to engage. And so Prabhupada he would just talk to somebody else. I always thought my husband was just brilliant, you know, for the way that he could engage with Prabhupada and ask questions and just be highly respectful, but be able to converse. And that wasn't easy. Even for, like, my husband told me that Satsvarup Maharaj said, wow, I really admire your, kind of relationship, because he also felt very overwhelmed. So anyway, that was a fun thing for me, that I got to see a teasing side of Srila Prabhupada. And so then Prabhupada left, I don't know, the evening or morning, can't remember, but, it was a very quick visit. And we went to the airport with him and just kind of sat nearby and just watched. Prabhupada just looked, he looked like kingly and regal, like wherever he was, standing in line just to go onto the plane. He just looked so, regal and poised and cultured, and just standing in line. It was fun to watch him. So anyway, Srila Prabhupada left, and after some time, I went back to Vrindavan, was continuing with different services there, and also doing things for the French Yatra. So it came to be the first Janmashtami there. It was the first Janmashtami celebration. And was it the first or the second? I lose track of time, but anyway, it was Janmashtami. And we still were not, people were not really coming much to our temple. It was way out there. It was, hard to get to at that time. It was also, we're just like new freaky thing that different people had different opinions about, Who are we? What are we doing? So we thought we have to do something to draw the crowds. So we had heard about this idea of this full bungalow, which, is a flower, making all flower decorations on the deity and in the deity room. So I'm pretty sure it was Kishori, the wife of Surabhi, who was the architect of the temple. And she was there. She often cooked for Srila Prabhupada, an extraordinary cook. And she had an idea that we could also do a full bungalow. So she was arranging, and she was saying, then the devotees can come, all the ladies can come and help. So we were prepared to help out. But, normally you hire, there are many people, like 30 men or so that do these things. And they have they put the tables out for spreading the cloth, and they do the stitching. Each one of the flower petal, the little buds are sewn on, and it takes many men and many hours. And so we were just there to kind of help do whatever we could do. So somehow or another, there was Kishori got in an argument or something happened that upset the men, and they just all walked out. And this was like in the evening. That was when they bring all the flowers, and then they're gonna put everything together, do the stitching all night long, and then in the morning we'd put it on the deities. So this was like, oh my God, we have advertised. We made a flyer, and devotees went out all around in town and advertised that we're having this full bungalow. So it was like, what are we going to do? And Kishore says, well, we have to just do it. We have to do it ourselves. And we're just this handful of people that haven't got a clue and how to do such things. And there was the talented family, Omkara and his wife and kids, who were very talented and artistic and creative. So they just decided they would make some crowns and belt or something. So they worked on that. And the rest of us, all it was is lining material that's supposed to be filled with flowers. And, we were up all night long doing this. And, there's just like a little design along the bottom that you could hardly see I mean, all those deities, like everybody was supposed to be decked out in flowers. Oh my goodness, it was really something. Like we thought, oh, what is going to happen? But I mean, they had to put it on. So here were the deities wearing this like lining cloth for Janmashtami with, little flowers dotted along it. And, we did what we could. And then people started pouring in, and this is like one of the first time that, that it was packed. It was filled with people. And it was like, oh my God, I thought, what are they going to do when it opens? And I thought, they're going to be so upset or so, this is so embarrassing. And this is like, I remember I was standing up on there, next to the pillars as a place where you can stand up so you could see. And I just was like horrified and everyone was so excited, and you know how it is, and the curtains are going to open, and all this, chanting and singing was going on by all these, villagers and visitors. And then the curtains open, and there they were. It was just pathetic. But everyone there just roared and were just ecstatic and blissful and dancing and chanting, and I just was amazed. I mean, they couldn't care less. They thought, oh, well, whatever, this is the way the Angrejis do it. So I thought it was so sweet that everyone was there to just glorify Krishna. And it just didn't matter. It didn't matter to anyone. They'd come and they had a great time. And so it was a wonderful Janmashtami. Anyway, being there in Vrindavan for me was just, I loved being there. And I loved the whole, sadhu life. Just so many people. You're surrounded by so many people who are just not buying into, the worldview of the West. And they just live this simple life. I remember I used to watch this Baba that lived next, right nearby. And I just was fascinated by him. He was always singing, and he was always happy. And he had one gamcha and one dhoti, and he had that little pump. Then he would, take his bath under the pump, and he'd rinse out the one cloth and put the other one up to dry. And that was it. That was it. That was all he owned. And yet, he was always singing, he was always busy all day long and chanting, and I just thought, this is so beautiful. When you think of people in the West, and they're just working so hard day and night, doing horrible things and tedious and boring things, and just so that they can have a house and have food. And really what we need is almost nothing. Here's this sadhu, just happy, And, it's true that during those early days, we all did live very simple. And I really liked it. I really liked it. I didn't have anything but like a carry-on suitcase. And that was it. That's all I owned. And I just felt like the more simpler you live, the easier it is, and, the more blissful it is, So I was really appreciating that, all the sadhus in Vrindavan and how they live, and it just really made sense to me. Of course, not everybody that's living there like that is a sadhu. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between, who is a great sadhu and who is a bum. But still, whoever's in Vrindavan, they're special people. So some respect is due. And for women, I would say this was challenging. Now is a time when I really start to see you know, the difference in India, the culture is just very, very different. You didn't have single ladies walking around anywhere, you know. And so here in India, we had to watch our step very carefully. It's sort of walking on eggshells a bit. And Prabhupada didn't really want single women to be in Vrindavan, you know, for obvious reasons. You know, single means probably gonna be married soon or whatever. And, you know, unlike in the West, everyone in Vrindavan, they know what is a Vaishnava. They may be practicing and they may not be practicing, but they know what you're supposed to be doing. And so they're watching us very carefully. And Prabhupada knew that. And he said, whatever you do, it reflects back on me. And, you know, so Prabhupada was very much more conscious, you know, that we had to know more about the culture, how we eat, how we, you know, clean ourselves, all these things that they don't really matter in the West. Nobody knows, you know, these customs and things, but in India, it matters. You know, like at this time, even Prabhupada's godbrothers, I mean, they wouldn't eat our food. You know, we're Malechas, you know, so it was a very different culture. I mean, eventually, Prabhupada teased his godbrothers into eating with him. That's another story. But eventually Prabhupada wanted the householders and whatever ladies were there to move over to what was called the Taparia house. I guess it was a person who donated it that became the Goshala. So that eventually happened. I'm not sure, you know, I think it was, yes, it was during Prabhupada's time that happened. And for myself, I returned to Jaipur to see the deities that we were having carved for France, to get them packed. Now this service was, of course I was learning on the job, but there was a lot to do in those days because this was also very new for these Mukutwalas, you know, working with the foreigners, sending things internationally. And so I, you know, had to sit there. I had to watch, you know, when they were going to pack the deities, what materials they were going to use, how they were going to do it. And, you know, rather than just ship it somehow to Delhi, I would carry the deities in a taxi, slowly, carefully bring them to the Delhi airport and, you know, ship them off. But there was a lot that was beginning to be formed. This was like the ISKCON style was being created. And Jamuna had started that, where, because normally most of the deities, if you go to this area in Jaipur, it's an amazing area where there's just shop after shop after shop of marble carving going on. It's very interesting to watch and to see this tradition, this culture, this artistry that's just mind-blowing, really. And learning all about it and dealing with these people. But, you know, normally people are not dressing deities the way we dress deities. Very often the deities' clothes are carved onto them, their crowns are carved onto them. So that's why some of our very first deities, like in Detroit and in Dallas, Radhakala Chanji, and most of those early deities, Radhalandanishwara, they have carved clothing and crowns on them because that's the way it was done. But we created a whole new style and now everybody follows this, you know. It's interesting to see what, you know, ISKCON has had its impact in different ways, sometimes very good, sometimes not so good, but it's just interesting to know that this had to be developed. So we had to sit there and make sure, because there's things that we wanted, like we want Krishna's, the holes to be big enough so that he can carry his flute nicely. And we want it to be able to reach to beneath his lips so he can play it. And we want there to be enough space that we can put his chauders nicely without difficulty. And we want there to be space between the legs so that we can put a dhoti on nicely or put pants on. You know, there are many things that we do that were not done. And so at that time, because they were just learning how to do this, learning what we like, the kind of painting and all of these things, we had to spend a lot of time there. So I spent a lot of time in Jaipur, which is a super blessing. It was fantastic. And, you know, like we like to have a little bit wider forehead because we're going to be putting mukut, you know, it's nice, or if you're going to have a turban, that you have enough space to do it nicely. And for darshan, it's also nice to have a little bit wider eyes. Well, that's really grown over time, but at this time it was just a little bit more than what they normally do. And so that was a wonderful service to learn how to do that I went on for, you know, decades for me. And so this is the first time I was doing that. And I also had to go and find all the cloth and so many things that were required. Everything that was required for the installation of deities, I would have to buy and ship it back. And even the shipping, everything was a real new thing that had to be learned how to do it properly. I remember going down to Bombay. This is a bit later, and Nartam had wound up being in Bombay. I guess he'd gone back and gotten a visa, came back to Bombay, and he was now the head pujari there. And because he was very, very good at that, and he really liked Bombay, and so he stayed there as a head pujari. And many years he was head pujari. He's still in Bombay, not as a head pujari, but developed an incredible incense business for many temples around the world. And so he's become a Bombay wala all these years. And, you know, for us, I mean, we were married, but again, this kind of very unusual ISKCON marriage where we were really like brahmachari and brahmacharini together. We never had any physical contact. We never even discussed anything that any normal married people would probably discuss, you know. And, you know, it had just kind of taken its course. Nartam was going to stay there. I was not staying in Bombay. I was, you know, had this new service to do, and I was still connected with France, and Bhagavan really wanted me to come back there. So, you know, it was just something that naturally dissolved, that we didn't even talk about it. Just like, okay, I'm going back to Vrindavan. Okay, I'm staying here in Bombay, and that was that. So these are the unusual types of things that we experienced in early on. So I had to return to France, and so I must have been in India. I'm very bad at it. It doesn't matter, you know, the exact times to me, because I just don't remember it. But I know that Gaur Nitai were installed in New Mayapur while I was still away. I had sent everything back. I may have actually gone back and helped with some sewing, but then I came back to India and was working to get everything ready for Krishna and Balaram's installation. So I came back, probably it was the second time I came back to France, and it must have been a couple of months before August of '76, because that's when Srila Prabhupada came to install Krishna and Balaram. So that was a mega marathon. to prepare everything. We knew Srila Prabhupada was coming. This was like super exciting. And so everything had to be prepared. All the outfits had to be stitched. Now, at this time, we hadn't really gotten into, we were making outfits primarily from, buying saris or buying cloth, buying trims, stitching them up ourselves, and making most things ourselves, we were still doing. And so there was a lot to do to prepare everything. And I had to bring so much stuff back from India, which was not easy. It was an art how you could get everything onto the plane sneakily. We had all these tricks to get things onto the plane without paying too much. Anyway, so Prabhupada, so this was going to be, very, very exciting. Prabhupada's coming. And we also had to prepare Srila Prabhupada's room, his quarters. And there was a very nice space there for Srila Prabhupada in the chateau. So I was responsible somehow for getting most everything for the room. I went to London to purchase everything that was in the room. I don't know why not in France, but I went to London with another devotee, Atita Gamana, an incredible seamstress, and we purchased, you see Srila Prabhupada, there are many, many pictures of him sitting on this asana there in France, which with this cloth that I remember buying in London. It's a very, a lot of pictures were taken during that stay. So you do see that. So making the asanas and everything, his bed, just everything that was required. I remember buying silverware there for Srila Prabhupada. And I saw something when I was in London that was this saffron silk wallpaper. And I thought, oh my God, that's perfect. We have to get that. It was really expensive and it was really beautiful. And so I brought it back, and who knows how to put wallpaper up? Not many of us. So it wasn't very easy, but we did our best. And we also thought, well, we should put, the gold leafing around the edges, how it is in chateaus. I mean, generally there's like gold leafing around, like photos and things. So paintings, I can't think of the word for the edges. So that also was another huge marathon that we had no idea would take so long, and practically the whole temple, everybody had to get involved putting this gold leaf on, and it was finally done in the last second, and Prabhupada came. And that visit was, unfortunately, Srila Prabhupada was really not well during his stay there. I just recall that it was very hard for him, that it was the day of the installation, and he did come down, and there are just a few pictures of that day. Actually, for some reason, it seemed like no one was there photographing. It's surprising. But there's a picture of Prabhupada. They had made a high bathing altar, and Prabhupada came up the stairs, and there's pictures of him bathing Krishna and Balaram, very, very beautiful. And then afterwards, Prabhupada went outside, and he did a mega initiation. There are some photos of that. And then, rather than coming back for the deities to be, for the opening, he just didn't feel well enough. So it was kind of awkward, because when I was going to dress Krishna and Balaram, and when I had everything ready, and you imagine I've been preparing for this for like months and months and months in India, and getting the DDs and getting all the outfits and everything was like totally exciting. This is it. This is the day. So I go in to start dressing, and Jai Tirtha had been, he was there. He was helping with all the puja. That was what he was really good at. And so he came in and he said, I'm dressing Krishna and Balaram. And I was so shocked. I just said, no, you're not. You are not. I've been preparing for this. I mean, normally I wouldn't have done that. You know, I mean, he's a GBC, he's a senior, and, you know, everything. But it was just too much for me. I was like, no. And I mean, he saw it, like, this is not negotiable. And so he said, okay, well, how about I dress Balaram and you dress Krishna? And I was like, all right, okay. And he said, because the thing is that we have to do this really fast. We have to do it really, and I didn't know that. He said, Prabhupada's going to finish out there and he's coming back in, so we have very little time. And so we, you know, it would be helpful. And I was, okay, I didn't know. So we had very little time. We were rushing, and then we found that Prabhupada was not coming back. And so it was kind of anticlimactic. I don't even remember when the opening, it just sort of happened at some point that we opened and devotees sort of straggled in. And so it was a little bit unusual, but nevertheless, very, very blissful. And so this visit of Srila Prabhupada, it was rather historical. This is the first Krishna Balaram deities ever installed in the Western world, I think. I mean, maybe there's somewhere else, but certainly in ISKCON. And perhaps the only Govardhan Shila that was approved to be worshipped by Srila Prabhupada in ISKCON. At that time, there were not Govardhan Shilas all over the place. And perhaps in India, perhaps in Mayapur, somewhere there was worship going on. But as far as I remember, while Prabhupada was there, one of his servants, what had happened prior, when devotees had visited India, Bhagavan had instructed devotees, don't take anything from Govardhan. And so one devotee didn't listen, and he came back and he showed, look what I got, a stone from Govardhan Hill. And Bhagavan was unhappy about that. He called me, he said, you know, this has to go back to, you know, Govardhan. When the next devotee will go to India, then we'll send back. But of course, there wasn't a lot of back and forth yet at this time. So he also had taken a stick from the tree where the Krishna had stole the gopis' clothing. So we had this stick and this stone, and we really, at least I had no understanding of Govardhan Shila. I mean, I had read something in Krishna book, whatever, but we just didn't know. So this stone and stick were sitting on the altar for many months, and I remember dressing the deities and moving them, picking them up, cleaning around, no worship, nothing. And so one of Prabhupada's servants came knocking on the pujari room door one morning when I was dressing the deities while Prabhupada was there. And he said, is that a Govardhan Shila on the altar? And I was like, yeah, I guess so. And he said, well, you can't just leave it on the altar. You're supposed to be worshiping it. I said, yeah, I don't know. I was just told to put it on the altar. And so he went straight up to Srila Prabhupada and said, you know, they have this Govardhan Shila, it's just sitting on the altar. And Prabhupada said, oh, let me see. So I came down, he took it, and then Prabhupada said, no, they can worship here, leave it here. And then he called Panditji, Pradyumna, and he said, tell explain to Bhagavan how you do this worship. So later, Pradyumna explained to Bhagavan how serious was this worship. Pradyumna had a way of speaking, and he was like, whoa, this is a very, very serious. If you don't do this worship properly, everything will be inauspicious. And this was a little scary to Bhagavan because there was a lot of struggling going on in those days. As a matter of fact, Srila Prabhupada, Bhagavan had gone to London to convince Prabhupada to come because Prabhupada was going to cancel because of his health. But Bhagavan knew, like, we just could not survive. We really needed a visit from Srila Prabhupada. So he went to London and he did convince Prabhupada to come. And so now Prabhupada is giving his permission to do this worship. And Bhagavan was worried. He was like, oh, well, I don't think we're ready for this. So he called me and he said, you take this stone, and he had a little jewelry box that was quite ornate and beautiful. I don't know where that came from, but he said, you put him in this little box and keep it locked and put in Prabhupada's quarters, and we'll just leave the stone there until we're ready for this. So was okay. So I did that. And then this is later, much later, after many months later. I don't know how long actually, but I remember I used to go in and sort of peek in and look at him and think. And I thought, this can't be right. This just can't be right to leave him in a dark, cold box in a room. And surely it would be better, that we serve him in a faulty way than to just not serve him at all. So I went to Bhagavan and I expressed my concerns, and I said, we just can't not worship him because we're afraid of making offenses. Isn't it offensive to just leave him hungry and cold in a box? And he's like, yeah, okay. So at some point, because you don't have to install a Govardhan Shila, but the worship began there. And I believe, I don't know of any other, I've never heard of any other Govardhan Shila that Srila Prabhupada said, yes, you can worship. So these are some special things about New Mayapur. And the quarters that Srila Prabhupada stayed in, there's not many, places in the world. They're very special sacred sites where Prabhupada had his quarters and where he installed himself by his own hand, the deities. So this is a very special place, and Prabhupada really enjoyed being there. And he went out a couple of times for walks on the property, which were like spontaneous, and then we all would run out, and it was exciting. And I recall one time Prabhupada sat down and he started speaking. And then he was quiet for a few minutes and he looked around and he said, so, what is the difficulty? And I was like, oh my gosh, he's asking. There's so many difficulties. There were difficulties, we're just trying to do so many things, starting a farm project, installing deities, opening a Gurukula, doing Sankirtan, all these things. And, there were problems. And I was like, well, Prabhupada's asking. Now we should, talk to him about all these problems. And so, I looked around, it was quiet, and I looked at the faces of all the devotees, and everybody's just looking totally blissful, smiling, effulgent, happy. And I thought, oh my, nobody's going to say anything. Maybe I should say something. And I was like, well, what's so important? And then I started thinking, no, that's not important, And then it was just like, yeah, whatever. And then Prabhupada said, yes, there is no difficulty as long as you are Krishna conscious. And I was like, oh, that's the key there, as long as you are Krishna conscious. But, you could see that it was true, that we were Krishna conscious in Prabhupada's presence, so we were just all happy. And all those problems that we thought we had, they were no longer a big deal. I couldn't even think of it. I was like, well, yeah, that's not really a big deal, you know, and that we became happy in Srila Prabhupada's presence. So, you know, Prabhupada was showing us, you know, the difficulties are that we are not serious enough, we're not Krishna conscious enough. Not that there aren't things that we need to solve, but still, it was an enlightening experience. And Srila Prabhupada was very much, he was very happy to see us set up there. You know, that we had all this land, this property. And he said, like a father that's just set up his kids, that they have everything they need for their life. So he said, now you have everything. You have good water here, you have a nice land, you have trees in the forest, you can make houses, and you can live nicely here. You can produce your own food. And Prabhupada really wanted just to see us do this, and he felt very happy. I remember there was one time he was looking out where the devotees used to take prasadam out on the lawn, and from his window in his quarters, he could see the devotees out. So he wanted to, he said, is the prasadam nice? He was concerned, are we eating well? And so then I believe it was a Yodhipati who was cooking at that time, better known as Bibi Govinda Maharaj now, who was an incredible cook and devotee. And they brought a plate up so that Prabhupada could taste, and he was very happy. He was very happy. He just saw, okay, you're fine. You're all set up. You have everything. And Prabhupada was particularly that he wanted us to grow our food. And so there was one devotee. Now, we were not doing that very much because, well, so many devotees had to be on Sankirtan. You had to run the school, you had to do the deity. You know, it was like we were a handful of people. And it was hard to do everything and to do it all right. But there was one devotee, Hari Bolananda, who was really into growing food. And we didn't know, but he had planted many things, and there was many things growing, but there were so many weeds over them that you couldn't tell, but he knew. So one night he picked everything that was growing that we didn't even know. There was a big pile of peas. Anyway, he had like a basket that he brought up to Srila Prabhupada late in the afternoon. And Prabhupada was so pleased. And he was literally like excited. And he said, oh, you have fresh peas here. So he wanted puffed rice and peas. Now, you know, Bhagavan came running down and he said, we need puffed rice and peas. We have to make this for Prabhupada right now. And I was like, well, we don't have any puffed rice. And he said, but we have to, Prabhupada wants it. And he said, I saw in India, you know, you just get the rice and you put it in the sand and you cook it and it puffs up. And I was like, I don't know, I think there's probably more to it than that. But he said, well, you have to try and do it because that's what Prabhupada wants. So here I am in the night with a flashlight going out, getting some dirt from the ground and putting the rice in and trying to, and sure enough, it didn't pop and it just became black and dirty. And so there was no, I can't remember, we sent something, we did something to send up to Prabhupada. So, you know, there is an art to making puffed rice, which I didn't know. And also Prabhupada had a meeting with the Gurukula in his quarters, which was a very, very interesting and very beautiful meeting. Jyotirmayi, the wife of Yogeshwara, was running the Gurukula. I think maybe Kripa Mayi, the wife of Indradyumna, may have been working there. I'm not sure if she was working in the Gurukula yet. But Jyotirmayi was in charge, and she was just doing a fantastic job from what I saw from a distance. I cannot say inside how it was, but it seemed to be very, very nice. And there was a lot of children there. I don't know how many, but there was a lot. And that room was packed. And Jyotirmayi was asking very clear, very vivid questions to Srila Prabhupada. She's a very intelligent woman, and she was making, she really wanted to hear, what are we supposed to do here? So those things are recorded, and they can be found. I can't reproduce them here from my memory, but it was really lovely. It was beautiful. Prabhupada loved meeting all the kids. And then I remember at the end of that meeting, he kind of dismissed everyone. It was over, and everyone was filing out. And I thought, what if I just keep sitting here? Because I saw that a few devotees weren't leaving. So I thought, well, maybe I'm just going to stay here and see if I could, get a little more nectar. So I was being a little bold to just stay until there were just maybe 5 devotees left in the room. So I was a little nervous about doing that, but I thought, well, I don't know, maybe I get to talk to Prabhupada or something. So then Prabhupada became very silent and very grave looking. And I started feeling uncomfortable. Oh, I probably shouldn't have done this. It was like frivolous. Why am I sitting here? And Prabhupada looked stern almost. And then he looked at each one of us, and with his finger, he was pointing. I don't remember who was there. I think Jyotirmayi maybe, and no, she went with the kids. Maybe Yogeshwara and Bhagavan. Just a few people were there. And Prabhupada said, all of you, he was pointing to everybody there. I think Anada was there. All of you must become guru. And then that was like the most shocking statement you could imagine. What is he saying? Yes, all of you must become guru. And it was like very grave, very serious, and we were just all stumped what to even say back. It was just such a surprise that he said that. And then he just suddenly became very light, and he said, it is not difficult. You simply repeat what I have said. And then he went, okay, like, all right, get out of here now. So that was interesting. And I mean, there is much that happened during that, but it's not my intention to tell, entire histories of everything. But it was a very historical event, and I wanted to talk a bit about it. There's much more, I think, in my husband's books and other memories that tell more about Prabhupada's stay there. But I recall that Srila Prabhupada told Bhagavan he was very pleased with this project. And he said to him that if you can get 5 such properties, you can change all of Europe. Now, that's a serious statement. And Bhagavan did try to do that. And we do have some very significant properties there. So there's New Mayapur. Then there's Villaggio. No, that was later. There was the Italy project and the Spain project, New Brajamandala, and Radhadesh. And so this effort was made. For better, for worse, there's a lot of good things about the history. There's also a lot of challenging things about the histories of those places, but these are very important. and very valuable properties, and most of them are still there and can be developed. So this is a wonderful thing and a hard, hard work that went on by many devotees who sacrificed just everything, you know, to be able to purchase these properties and to at least begin Prabhupada's vision for these places. So I think I'll stop there. And yeah, it's just wonderful to remember all of these experiences. And hopefully there'll be something of interest for people on into the future to know about these histories and experiences. Hare Krishna.